Strange Kind of Woman was one of the 2 tracks from Fireball which was destined to stay the course and become one of the highlights of Made in Japan. It was used as the musical platform for a light-hearted vocal duel between Blackmore and Gillan.
It was Blackmore and Gillan sort of riffing off each other, Blackmore playing a guitar figure, Gillan singing it back to him, and it goes on and on and on. It's indicative of what Purple did at the time. It'd be interesting to know if audiences these days would be as tolerant of something like that. But I guess in 1972, in Japan, they clearly loved it.
One of those audience gobdroppers at time, because Gillan would come out with some extraordinary vocal gymnastics and followed by some extraordinary guitar gymnastics.
Once again, it shows off Gillan's huge range, the ability, and also the ability to be able to mimic what Ritchie Blackmore had just played before him.
A battle to the death of vocals versus guitar.
When you look at the old Danish TV film, you can see there's a camaraderie there, there's a laughter, there's a sense of friendliness. Unfortunately, much later on, you could, and I remember going to a particular gig with them, and you could see the animosity. You could see the animosity that was creeping in between Gillan and Blackmore. And it was almost that, like the interplay was getting nasty, that it was no longer a couple of mates having a laugh and goading one another along.
Strange Kind of Woman, which was essentially a 3.5 minute pop song, you know, done in the inimitable Purple style. By the time it got into Made in Japan, it had become this great big sprawling epic, really. And I think for people who hadn't seen Purple live, hearing the stuff on the radio, hearing the stuff on Made in Japan, might have encouraged them to think, hang on a minute, these guys are doing something completely different on stage, I've just got to go and see them.
The other track from Fireball, which found its way onto Made in Japan, was, of course, The Mule. This was to become famous as the showcase for the Ian Pace drum solo.
If you're going to name your top 10 Purple tracks, The Mule probably wouldn't be amongst them, but I think it's an interesting little workout for the band. It's somewhat experimental. It seems to, you know, just kind of develop and go on forever without any kind of focus to it.
You start with the basic, simple little idea, then you get 5 minds saying, well, I think this would fit with that. That's what we do. You know, that's maybe why they're not too melodic, they're not too lyric.
It's the thing about drum solos, isn't it? You know, drum solos should never be released on albums. They should only be released on live audiences, and that's it. You know, there's no place for a 20-minute or a 9-minute drum solo on an album where it's just a waste of bloody vinyl as far as I'm concerned.
If you listen to Pace's drumming on The Mule, it's powerful but very, very fast. He was probably one of the fastest rock drummers that you would ever see. Very, very speedy licks.
it just shows his great musical ability as a drummer as well as his technical ability as a drummer. Although I have to say that, you know, from the first moment that Ian starts playing on virtually any of the tracks, you know, you'd have to be a bit stupid not to realise his ability.
He wasn't just sort of playing over the top of what the band was doing, he was accenting it and phrasing with Richie Blackmore and with John Lord. So between all of them, they played like a jazz big band, I think, in many respects.
He can hit the drums incredibly hard, be incredibly powerful, but he's also got this lightness of touch, and you really hear that on some of the tracks on Made in Japan, on things like Lazy, Space Trucking, where he backs right off the beat. And it's an unusual drum sound for such a heavy band.
He's not just keeping the beat, you know, he's doing some very, very clever stuff. He's doing some very, very clever little fills and tricks in there that really, I think, elevate Purple above their peers, because it's one thing to have, you know, a powerful pounding rhythm section, and it's another thing to have one that's slightly more inventive than that and is doing things above and beyond the call of duty.
Physically, it's quite demanding. The hardest thing is keeping the sweat out of my eyes, believe it or not. That's the hardest thing. It's fun, but it's not that difficult, other than if you're not feeling like 100%, it can get a bit tiring after half an hour.
The next album produced by the Mark II lineup was the all-time classic Machine Head. This amazing album provided the raw material for 4 of the tracks on Made in Japan: Highway Star, Smoke on the Water, Lazy, Space Trucking. These 4 classics soon burrowed their way into the set and stayed there for the next 35 years.
And that lineup had been together for quite some time by then, obviously touring the world, and it shows in the songs. You know, the compositions are stronger, the performances are quite dynamic. They actually managed to capture some of the excitement they had live in the studio.
Machine Head, they gave us, because of the Fireball result, they said, all right, we'll give you 2 months off. Consequently, it was a great LP, I thought. And we had ideas, Ian Gillan, myself and Roger. It began to become a trio writing then. Right. John started stepping back, and Ian just gives percussive ideas. And so it was a trio by Machine Head.
What is astonishing is that it was recorded in just a few days between December the 6th and December the 21st, which is an incredibly short period of time for a classic rock album to be recorded. It shows that they were seasoned studio musicians. It shows that they could go in there and absolutely just do it.
In a way, of course, it did actually inspire what became the heavy metal movement of the later decades, you know, the late 70s and early 80s, and when screaming and frantic guitar solos became ever more intense and over the top. Deep Purple may be being blamed for all of that, but of course what they did was far more subtle and more imaginative than all that came after it.
If you'd never heard Deep Purple before and you wanted to check out a studio album of theirs, you probably would point them in the direction of Machine Head more than any other album.
Machine Head was massively popular, but behind the scenes, all was not well.
Ian Gillan and Richie Blackmore have got this classic relationship that lead guitar players tend to have with lead singers. There's this constant friction between the two of them. Obviously, it led to some fantastic music, but off stage there was obviously a lot of arguments and a lot of problems.
See, I have my own dressing room because I like to tune up and I like my solitude before I go on stage. I tend not to get too involved in people because, to be quite honest, I find a lot of people are boring.
Gillan felt it was just becoming Blackmore's backing band, and if you look at stage clips from back then, from like late '72, you can almost sense an exasperation in Ian Gillan sometimes when Blackmore just won't shut up, if you like.
She was so evil, man. She used to do the worst things.
I'm still very moody, shy and very honest, which a lot of people can't take, you know. Honest? Yeah. And which is the hardest thing in this business is is sincerity. Once you can fake that, you're laughing, you know.